So a lot of you wanted me to make a video like this, and I said to myself, why should I rank the Spider-Man movies? There's plenty of ranking videos on those already. But since Spider-Man Far From Home is still fresh in the theaters, I figured I'll just write a little script for this video and do a ranking of all 8 Spider-Man films. I already made a video a couple years ago talking about who's my favorite Spider-Man actors out of the 3. Who's my favorite Spider-Man actor? If you guys want to see that video, check out the card right above there. Now, to preface this, just because a certain movie may be ranked higher or lower does not mean one is better or worse than the other, or just a bad movie altogether. This ranking is based solely on how I feel about these movies and how I personally enjoyed them over the years, and also entertainment value. It's also based on how I feel at the time of the recording of this video, so things may change in the near future. Everything that I'm saying in this video could be completely scrapped, and then tomorrow I may have a completely different list, so just keep that in mind. Anyways, let's get right into this thing. So coming in at number 8 is Spider-Man 3. How do I describe Spider-Man 3? Coming in at number 7. No, for real though. No, for real though. Spider-Man 3 was both good and bad for me at the same time. Venom Spidey was designed pretty cool, and as a kid, I enjoyed every single piece of that. For me, back then, as a kid, all I cared about was fighting and swinging and punching and cool costumes and all that stuff. But as I grew up and over time, I started to notice the cringe and the bad writing and just some of the character choices, which we won't talk about. Honestly, everything was just all over the place with that movie. Number 7 goes to The Amazing Spider-Man. So right after Tobey Maguire exited the scene, right in came in Andrew Garfield to take over the mantle as Spidey. Now, this movie did a lot for me back in middle school. A fresh new design for Spidey. They introduced web shooters opposed to biological ones. The love interest was Gwen instead of Mary Jane. And quite frankly, the movie had one of the best scores out of all these movies that I've seen. It definitely has one of the best ones. And it just had everything you wanted to see in a basic Spider-Man film. All the swinging and the punching and all that stuff. And Spider-Man doing his Spider-Man thing. However, where this movie lacks for me is the writing. I feel Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker didn't seem to struggle as much as Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker did. And I kind of felt that he got the girl a little bit too easy. Like, I kind of describe him as like a good Spider-Man when he's in the costume, and a pretty too cool for school Spider-Man or Peter Parker. But all in all, the movie never fails to be entertaining. Number 6, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, following right after The Amazing Spider-Man, this movie introduced to us Electro and continued some of the awesome web swinging and action that I wanted to see in a Spider-Man film. It was sort of nice seeing the relationship between Peter and Gwen, and it was just nice to see them happy in general. Also, the actor for Harry that they chose was just really cringy, and like, he certainly lacked the swagger and charm that James Franco had in the older films. To me, it seemed that Peter was more charming than actually Harry in this film, which is supposed to be kind of switched around because Peter is supposed to be a dork, a dweeb, and here's Harry just cringy and just looks like he wants to just do something bad, like his face screams villain. And also, the ending when Gwen died really just made me depressed for a long time, and the more I think about this film, I just feel sad. I was so happy for Pete and Gwen, and then when he lost her, I just felt for him. And this is comic book accuracy, and some would argue that this element made the story a lot more intriguing and good, but to me, it just made me very sad. Coming in at number 5 is Spider-Man Far From Home. So as of now, I've still only seen the movie once. I planned on seeing it again before I did this little ranking video. Now, there's a lot of things that work well for me in this movie and stuff that I like, but unfortunately, I saw this movie as more of an Avengers Endgame sequel more than an actual Spider-Man film. They focused a little bit too much on Tony Stark for me. It was very cool and important to see the legacy and how things affected the future going forward. However, I felt like that element with Tony Stark passing on the torch was implied way too much in the film for me, at least after my first viewing. There's a lot of big action sequences in the film, and there was one specific big one that I really enjoyed with Mysterio, and I thought the visual effects of that was really amazing. Like Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, as I said in my movie review, was definitely a good choice and brought a lot of spunk and interest to the character for me. A lot of people didn't like Zendaya as this whole MJ character, but this new MJ character, which is why I liked her, was completely different from Mary Jane. They used the MJ to sort of tie back and reference Mary Jane, but I actually liked Zendaya as MJ and as the love interest. I thought it was interesting. Some of the romance did feel forced for me in this film. Also, I felt the movie had some pacing issues for me, but all in all, the action, of course, was great. As I mentioned, Spidey fighting stuff, him with his new suits and all that was very cool. I enjoyed the most of it. And Tom Holland always gives a great job as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. So maybe in my second viewing, things will change, but as of right now, that's how I'm feeling about the film. Coming in at number 4 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, I put this movie a lot higher than Spider-Man Far From Home right now because there were just a lot of things in this movie that screamed Spider-Man. Granted, there were a lot of things in Far From Home that screamed Spider-Man, but in this one, we kind of got to see how the MCU would handle a Spider-Man into the universe having been with Sony all this time. But what made this movie really good for me was that it didn't follow the typical Spider-Man origin story where Uncle Ben dies and then Peter has to get bit by a spider and then he gets mad and he wants to avenge Uncle Ben. We already got introduced to Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War and did a good job in tying in some of the Uncle Ben stuff and also with Tony Stark in there and seeing his origins. But in this movie, we see Iron Man teach Peter Parker how to become more responsible and be like the father that he never had. On top of that, it had some amazing emotional scenes that really stick with me, especially that scene where Peter was underneath the rubble and he was screaming for help and no one was coming to him and he had to really realize who he was, and they did that nice throwback with great power comes great responsibility and all those little highlights that really made that scene emotional alongside with the music, and he just pushed himself up and then it was just so amazing when that scene was going through. But a lot of people would argue that this Spider-Man film isn't even that great to begin with. A lot of people hated it, saying that Spider-Man received a lot of these things. It was a lot of hand-me-downs from Tony Stark. He never had to grind and work for things as some of the other Spider-Man actors did, and how Spider-Man normally does things in the comic books. But I found it a very entertaining approach to the character, a more new age, more modern approach to the story, because sometimes when things keep getting repetitive, you kind of get old of it and you kind of get tired of it really quickly. Coming in at number 3 is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. Now, what more can you say about this film? We had a great villain, a great story, a great character development, great conflict between friends, love interests. After seeing everything that Spider-Man goes through in the first movie, this movie really took it up another notch to demonstrate his progression as a hero and also a person. There's a lot of real world elements you can see your everyday person going through, and I feel that Sam Raimi represented that very well with Spider-Man by making him feel more ground level and more relatable. But also, how could you forget that iconic train sequence in that film? I mean, honestly, it's one of the most iconic scenes that we've seen ever in superhero history. Spider-Man Homecoming, they try to replicate this entire sequence with him in the boats doing the whole thing, but it didn't have the same impact as it did in the Sam Raimi film. When Spidey's trying to stop this train, he's giving his all. He's pouring his heart and soul into stopping this train and saving these people regardless of the villain getting away. He cares about the lives of these people on this train, and by the time he actually saves them, seeing all the citizens on that train just put him back and hold him on top, all of that just goes to show how much they respected Peter Parker or Spider-Man and how much they needed him and how much he needed them. Also, the writing, the fights, and the visuals, and just the story altogether, the soundtrack, everything was great about this film. There's not too much I hate about this film, and I grew up watching this stuff, so obviously it's gonna be a lot higher for me. So following Spider-Man 2 for number 2 will be Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Now, as far as superhero films are concerned, this is one of the first superhero films that I've ever seen as a child, and instantly, guys, at that age, I became a huge Spider-Man fan. I wanted to buy those Spidey web shooters, and for Christmas, I ended up getting a bike that year, but still, I just really was so invested in Spider-Man and just this whole thing. I didn't know anything about Spider-Man prior to this film. But as I mentioned for the last movie, this movie really showcases Peter Parker as your everyday guy. While he had on the suit fighting bad guys, it was all cool to see him do all these things. And then when he took off his suit, he just became a good old Peter Parker walking on the street, having to deliver pizzas, working fluff jobs, getting paid like no money, trying to pay his rent, which he never pays, always late. It's just seeing all of these things about Peter Parker and just making it so relatable. It's like I saw myself as a kid, like, man, like I could be Spider-Man. I can't be Spider-Man really, but like I am, you get what I'm saying? Like I saw myself being Spider-Man. I saw myself climbing walls and being, because I saw a person that I could relate to as far as being a normal dude. Now, even throughout this movie and the second movie, we get to see Harry Osborn and Peter's relationship really grow and spiral through all of these three movies. And their relationship is so believable. You see them as best buds. You see them as people. And also, Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, definitely one of the best villains we've seen on screen. Willem Dafoe delivers one of the greatest performances, I would say, next to Josh Brolin as Thanos and Mark Hamill as the Joker in the animated films. It just delivers one of the best performances, and I could not be happier with this movie. Speaking of making suits, and I was talking about it earlier, I was talking to my friend Captain Phil, or Phil Effects, and I was talking to him, and I said in the theater, remember the good old days that Spider-Man used to stitch his own suits and his own costume together? Now it's being made by nanotech, you know, but you know, times change, man. But I appreciate a lot of those attention to detail, showing this man as a hard worker, someone who never gave up and always fought for what he wanted. Now, this may not come as a surprise, but my number one Spider-Man film as of right now is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, before the movie came out, I was a little bit skeptical as to what this movie was, like how good it was going to be. I knew I wanted to see Miles Morales portrayed on screen. I knew I wanted to see this type of animated art style. So I figured the more trailers came along, the more I became more invested in this movie. Now, I remember sitting down watching this movie, and immediately it like grew on me. The characters, the comedics, the comedy, the actors, the writing, the relationships on screen, the friendship, the support, the soundtrack, like everything about this was so good. Just the way how the story was told, all the emotions that were portrayed, the messages about family and fatherhood and brotherhood and just all these different hoods. There's just so much stuff in this film for you to walk away with, and by far one of my favorite scenes in this film is seeing Miles Morales sing Sunflower. Like, Sunflower is one of my favorite songs. You can ask my girlfriend, you can ask my family. I would have that song on a repeat. I absolutely love that song. I love the comic book style of the art. I just loved the way how things worked in general with this film, and I could not be happy. This is literally a comic book come to life on screen, and all those reasons make this one of the best Spider-Man movies. You had the multiverse, you had them introducing all these different spider people, you had them just doing it. It was just awesome, man. It was a lot of fun. I've seen this movie about 5 times so far, like right now, and I just can't get enough of it. Well, anyways, guys, there you have it. That's my ranking of all the Spider-Man films. I felt like this video was long, but it's not that long. If you guys made it to the end, let me know your thoughts down below if your list differed from mine in any way, and don't forget to check out that video I mentioned earlier on who I think is the best Spider-Man actor to be playing Spider-Man right now. Let me know your thoughts down below. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. Clockmaster out.